Get a meeting.
It is 7 o'clock on Monday, March 11th, 2024, and I will call this City Council study session to order. I do want to thank everyone joining us this evening, and as a friendly reminder, there's no public comment during study sessions. If you all would join us in the flag salute, and if Mayor Pro Tem Whitaker would lead us.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I just want to note that Councilmember Peretti is absent this evening. It is a study session, so we won't take a motion to excuse. And then for staff, we have our Director Madden, Director Simpson, Assistant Chief Murray, and our City Clerk Tricia Summers. Council, we have two items this evening. The first one is a presentation from Framework with an update on our Milton Parks Recreation and Open Space Plan. It starts on page 3 of your packet. I'm going to turn the floor over to Director Madden to start the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight we'll be updating Council on the PROS plan that Milton is putting together as part of its comprehensive plan. What you have in front of you is an overview of the plan. And Hope, who is joining us from Framework, has been instrumental in moving this project forward, analyzing all of the parks, operating budgets, and looking at future improvements. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Hope with Framework.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your time in listening to this presentation. My name is Hope Afrigi. I'm an urban designer and planner with Framework. And I've had the pleasure of working with city staff on this plan. My career started within parks. My first job out of college was working for a nonprofit that supports the national parks in San Francisco. I think this is really important work, and I'm excited to share it with you. As I imagine many of you know, the Recreation and Conservation Office is the state agency that manages grant funds for park and recreation projects across the state. They require that city agencies prepare a parks plan in order to be eligible for this funding. This parks plan is connected with a comprehensive plan. Essentially, the parks element of the comprehensive plan is a higher overview of what I'm going to present today, and it also connects to the capital facilities element. The overall goal is to inform land acquisition and parks improvement, essentially inform how Milton's park system grows and how it addresses the needs of the growing community, and how it can improve and enhance access to parks and recreation for healthy lifestyles in Milton. So this project started with a survey. We distributed an online survey, which I'll talk more about what those results were later in this presentation. We then did a facilities inventory, looking at what is currently within the parks system, and then creating a level of service metric that the city can use to measure how the park system needs to grow. We presented this work to the Parks Board last year. They reviewed the plan as well as city staff. We also presented parts of this plan at Milton Days last year, and I'll be sharing some of the feedback we received there. And then the next step is to get feedback from you all, make changes to the plan based on that, and hopefully adopt it this April. So an overview of the park system in Milton, and kind of looking at how we analyze the park system. We've got the bulk of the parks, which is community and neighborhood parks. Those are the main city parks. Also looking at natural areas. We also quantified private parks to look at what various Milton residents have access to. Also looking at indoor facilities, the interurban trail, access points to the interurban trail, and school facilities. So looking at public engagement, we had 80 respondents to the survey. Some of the themes were that people really appreciate the interurban trail. They're excited about the new pickleball courts, and in general, they really appreciate Triangle Park. When asked what's missing from Milton Parks and Trails, the most common answers were access to Surprise Lake, an off-leash dog area, restrooms, and outdoor events. And then looking at some of the things that people value, the things that people rated as most important were park spaces that preserve or enhance environmentally sensitive areas, as well as parks that provide passive recreation, such as trails, picnicking, and open lawn. And then we aggregated some of the write-in answers to look at themes. So people like that Milton parks are clean and well-maintained. They appreciate that they're accessible, close by, easy to get to. They appreciate the trails and that the parks are green, lush, and shaded. Things that people hope for in the parks are a splash pad. That's, a common thing we're seeing in a lot of cities, that people want that, especially as summers get hotter. Again, people requesting a dog park, and then also asking, hoping for cleaner and safer parks. So our starting point for our level of service metric was what was in the 2015 comprehensive plan. This used the traditional metric, which is acres per 1,000 residents. This is good. This is a good metric in that it's simple. It's pretty easy to calculate, but what it means is that as the population grows, the city then has to acquire more and more land because it's calculated as acres per 1,000 residents. So it's not always an accurate, comprehensive metric, because at some point the city doesn't have more land that they can acquire. And so we wanted to look at a metric that would more comprehensively say, what do people want in the parks? How can this be provided within the parks that already exist by adding programming? So the way we went about this was in terms of land access programming. That was our overarching strategy. It sounds better when you say land access programming, but you kind of start at the bottom with programming. So we want to make sure, that the parks have amenities that people need in order to use them. So for kids, that could be playgrounds or open lawn. For some, for older populations, they need shaded areas, accessible benches, paved paths for walking. This can also be how the parks are programmed in terms of events, sports leagues, and whatnot. And then in terms of access, a common metric that the National Recreation and Parks Association recommends is that everyone should be within a half mile of a neighborhood park. In communities where people are mostly driving, it's not as much of a need, but it can still be important to make sure that people can access parks on foot, bicycling, etc. And then looking at land, looking at where the city may want to acquire new land in order to meet park needs. So as I mentioned, we did a facilities inventory and kind of took a look at what exists in the parks now, what condition are things in, essentially, taking inventory of sports fields, benches, barbecues, gardens, and we noted facilities that might be missing based on public feedback and sometimes other factors. For example, within comprehensive planning, we're looking at increasing multimodal transportation, which is why bike racks are recommended. Heat relief was something that people mentioned in the survey, wanting shaded playgrounds, as well as many who requested a splash pad. And that's also something that's recommended to accommodate older populations. So we made note of what's currently there and what might be missing. And then we created designations for the parks. Sometimes you see these designations and they're mostly just related to size. A large, 10-acre plus park is a community park, and then your smaller parks are neighborhood parks. We wanted to look at it more in terms of programming, and that way, if the city were to add programming to an existing park, it could essentially switch designations. I'll explain that more, but so a community park being a park that serves multiple neighborhoods because it's large, it has multiple programming options, or because it has a specialized facility that draws people from different parts of the city. So Milton Skate Park being something that it offers skating, which isn't offered otherwise in the city, or Milton Community Park because it has several facilities. And then a neighborhood park being a park that serves everyone in the neighborhood because it offers both active and passive amenities. So a playground, benches, sports facilities, something for everyone, but they can still be small. And then natural areas and green space corridors. This is something that is important to people in Milton, we found in the survey. So including that within the level of service. And then adding waterfront access as a park designation so that the city can prioritize providing that. Obviously, that's an opportunistic thing. You can't just decide that there's going to be land available around Surprise Lake for you guys to purchase. But if it does become available and the city's able, having that within the level of service to say, this is a park type that we don't have and that people want. And so it might be something that the city wants to pursue. So looking at active versus passive amenities. So when we're talking about a neighborhood park, again, this is a park that has something that allows people to be active, something that allows people to enjoy the park passively. Basically, it's just a park that anyone can use. It's not just a baseball field. It's not just a skate park. It's something that, you know, any person who lives in the neighborhood would be able to use. So these neighborhood parks that serve everyone are what we're looking at when we're looking at a half-mile service range. So we mapped a half-mile buffer around Milton's neighborhood parks. We also looked at Woodlands Park because it is accessible by Milton residents and it does have those amenities. And when you map it out, you see that the west portion of the city is lacking this type of park. The annexation portion towards Auburn is also lacking this, but they do have several private parks, so we're less concerned about this area. So here's our updated proposed level of service. So this looks at parks according to what amenities they have. So neighborhood parks, community parks, natural areas and green space corridors, and waterfront access. The waterfront access and the natural areas are the new designations that we're including. The right-of-way acreage that surrounds the interurban trail is included in the natural areas. It acts as a buffer to High Lobos Creek and you know, is undeveloped, and so it's included in that acreage. And so using this calculation by 2030, which is this time span that this plan would be active for, when you adopt a PROS plan, you're eligible for funding for 6 years. So by 2030, if the city didn't add any park space, under this calculation, there'd be a deficit of 4.5 acres of neighborhood park, just shy of 3 for a community park. There'd be an almost 7-acre surplus of natural areas and green space corridors, and a deficit of 3 acres for waterfront access. And this is an element that the RCO highly recommends you have within your plans. It's not necessary, or it's not required, and it's not binding in any way, but it's a way for the city to track how the parks are growing and how you're addressing the growing population and programmatic needs. I'm going to skip that one. Okay, so starting with programming, which is how we kind of viewed the capital facilities project. So what are the programming elements that people want, and how can we find a way to provide that within the existing parks? You know, that's the simplest way to go about it. You don't have to acquire new land and design a whole new park. So what is it that people really want, and how can we provide it within the existing parks? So looking at Hill Tower Park, this is a park that people mentioned within the survey as being, you know, potentially due for a redesign. It's really centrally located, close to the skate park, close to Milton Community Park, as well as several churches and schools. So there's an opportunity to add programming there and kind of you create this sort of park hub and fill in some of the programmatic gaps. So here's Hill Tower Park as it exists now. There's a pretty basic playground. There's a basketball court that's in a bit of disrepair. There's the existing structure you see has some utilities on it. And then there's a hillside with mature trees. During, you know, when it snows, it's a great sledding hill. So as part of this project, we looked at how the city could potentially add some programming to this park to increase its usability. And the idea here isn't to say this is exactly how it should be designed, but we wanted to have a conceptual design that we could then take to the community, see what they thought, and have a parks plan that the city could really run with. So this design shows in the blue on the plan area, the play area gets expanded. You've got, slides built in the hillside. You could have, various types of equipment, like a zip line was something people were really excited about. This design maintains a sports court. It could stay basketball. It could be something else. The big move here is that the parking lot becomes a plaza. The parking lot's the only flat area of the park, so it could lend itself really well to being used as a plaza, and then you could put angled parking on the street. And we were really pleased with the feedback we got when we brought this plan to Milton Days. The plan on here is a hand-drawn one, but it's the same design. And so we had this activity where we had pictures of different programmatic elements and asked people to, put a sticker on what they were most excited about. People are really excited about a splash pad, a zip line, ropes course. Our audience at Milton Days was a lot of youth, so that might have skewed our data. But we were also very pleased that people were really supportive of the idea of turning the parking lot into a plaza. So that was positive feedback. There's also the potential to acquire the site that's north of Hill Tower Park and really expand this into, a big park facility. Hill Tower Park is 2 acres. The site to the north is 2.5, so you'd be more than doubling that space. This is really it could be used for a lot of different things. It's a wooded area. It could be used for trails, for walking or biking. So this is an opportunity to create, a large park facility in Milton and add a lot of cool programming to it. So then looking at access, how do we address having a park within a half mile of every resident? Here's that map again. I'm going to zoom into this area where the trail curves. Oops, here. Actually, I'm going to go back. Okay, so Milton Park was previously designated as a neighborhood park, but it's just a baseball field, so it's not really serving the needs of everyone in that neighborhood. You could try to add things to it: benches, shade trees, a path, a playground, but there's not a ton of room. So in terms of adding a park on the west, it might not be the most feasible solution. There's also the potential to develop some of the natural areas in green space, which is confusingly depicted in orange, but you could add programming there, and that could serve as a neighborhood park. There's also the potential to add connections to the interurban trail, which is are the circles with the dotted line. That was another thing that people had mentioned, was wanting additional access points to the interurban trail. It's not like it's a hugely expansive trail, but it's still, if people have access to a trail that's close by them, they're much more likely to use it. And so we did note a few points along the interurban trail that are within the right-of-way or that are city-owned land that could be additional access points for the trail, and could also be done in conjunction with a cool new park design. And as the trail expands, as I'm sure you know, the city is continuing the trail to Edgewood. Edgewood is continuing their trail north, which connects, miles and miles of regional trail. So eventually you could have people biking all the way down from Seattle into Milton. And so if you are creating these access points where people could get off the trail and go visit a park, that could be an exciting addition. Okay, so where can the programmatic needs not be met within existing parks? Where might the city want to acquire land? Some of them we've talked about, so maybe an area in the western portion of the city around West Milton Park. Talked about the site that's north of Hill Tower Park, the area around Surprise Lake, if something were to become available. And then there's also opportunities to capitalize on this new trail that's being built to really make it an exciting new addition, have some trailside park amenities there. So that's how we arrived at our capital facilities project list. Some of these are kind of an either or, like with addressing the need for a park in West Milton. There are several ways to do that, whether you add programming to West Milton Park, whether you want to develop some of the natural area, some of the High Lobos Creek area, or whether it's an acquisition. There's also Olson Park, which is I'll show you the next slide. Olafson Estate was gifted to the city, and as of 2030, it's eligible for development as a park and planned for development as a park. So that's going to be serving that area of the city. So this shows a potential future where you have some additional park space and how that would affect the access map. So essentially, that's how we arrived at this list of priority projects for the city to consider. And again, the goal of this plan is to be eligible for park funding. So as grants arise, the city can apply for whatever grant and project they desire. The plan doesn't, make the city beholden to any one certain project, but can help when those grants arise to make the case for being awarded that funding. And that's what I've got for you. I'm happy to zoom back to any other slides and answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Strader?
What size of grants could be we looking at, the amounts?
Yeah, there's a lot of different grants that are available. Some of them can be up to $1 million. Some of them are smaller. There's really a range.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. What is now you mentioned the land just north of Hill Tower Park, but is that really possible for us to acquire it?
In terms of being able to afford
To be able
it.
to expand the park? I mean, is that really a reasonable opportunity there for the city to?
Do you mean reasonable as in like whether it's worth it to spend the
Right,
funds?
well, or is it even, are they even willing to sell it to the city to?
It is for sale. That was why it was identified as such. It would just be a matter of determining what the city's priorities are, and there are grants that allow you to acquire land. So if that was something that the city wanted to prioritize, that I think it would be feasible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for the presentation and learning to understand the complexity of Milton. We don't have a lot of flat land. We have a lot of hilly land. We have, I don't know of any park that is totally flat other than the ball field, which is supposed to be. But no, it does challenge us to incorporate all of the advantages of a strong park system in topographical changes that we have. I like the idea. I'd like to see Hill Tower Park extended all the way down 19th to the corner. But topographically, it's difficult. So we have to be very creative of what we want to do and how we could accommodate that. Recent history, there's been a big push for dog park, someplace in the city of Milton. Now that topographical can change a little bit with that. That's not a bad thing and so forth. But these things come and go. What people want last year is not what they want next year. So it takes a lot of foresight to see what we're going to do with these things. Parks are essential. Well-performing parks are more essential. So that I'm almost a little sad to see we're going to lose grass area in the community park with more walkways around the park and so forth. They may be very good, but every time you take grass out and put a pavement in, it changes the complexion of parks. And I think people want more feelings of just a rural park without a lot of parking, driveways, buildings, and so forth. So each time we do something very progressive, which is what we're planning to do in the community park, it takes one function away to put a new function in, which kind of stresses you to understand what's a park and what is a building. What is a park and what is walk paths and so forth. How do you incorporate those into being progressive for the normal user? I've seen that circular in the mid park, the circular walk around and so forth, which is very good for folks who need an easy walk area. But it takes away from the park for other creative or physically creative types of things you can do with the park. So it takes a lot of thought process to really understand what the public wants in the parks. But this is a very good start. And I appreciate all the information you're providing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Councilmember Cedar?
Thanks for the presentation and for all the work taking feedback from the community. Just a question about this level of service. So under the new level of service standards, the metric that you've laid out, that the framework has come to here, it appears to favor Milton in that we have lots of natural areas and green space corridors. Right, so now we're showing a surplus there, whereas at least my understanding of the new level of service metric is we are maybe more favored because neighborhood parks and community parks seem to be weighed less. Is that accurate, or am I misreading it?
You're saying weighed less because it's a lower acres per person, or?
Correct, or is it the inverse so that it's weighed more as a result of that?
Okay, under this calculation, it's saying 2 acres of neighborhood park for every 1,000 resident versus 5 acres of natural and green space per resident. So it's a higher amount of green space and natural area than developed park.
I see. So when we're looking at this chart, and this wasn't the one I was looking at, but I can do it off this. So let's take neighborhood park there. It says adopted level of service standard 2, and then acres needed 3.92. Can you just break down how that translates?
Yeah. So that means 2 acres per 1,000 residents. So, 2020, there's 8,211 residents. Doing math on the fly is maybe one of the scariest things a human could do. But so that basically, that means that, I wish I had a calculator.
And let me try a different way, because I know what you're doing, right? It's confusing because whether it's over 2 or under 2 is unclear. What I see here is that this new level of service standard would allow Milton to satisfy its level of service by having 2.2 or 2.3 approximately acres. Maybe it's even less than that.
Well, so right now there's 12.5 acres of neighborhood park. So that's what's existing. And so 2 acres per 1,000 people is about 16 acres total, right? So missing about 4 is, and there's a lot of different ways to adopt this, to have the standard. There's some guidance that says you need 10 acres per person, but the city would have to acquire a ton of land to get there.
And I guess that gets to kind of my point here. Like, is this new level of service metric just to make us feel a little bit better and acquire less land?
It's to target what people have said they want within the parks and how the city can accomplish it. So some of this was from looking at what can the city acquire, what does the city maybe need to acquire to give to satisfy what people need within the park system, and that's the target. So it's not, so 2 acres of neighborhood park is our new standard. The old one was 1 to 2. So it's the same. We're not doing a range because that doesn't make a ton of sense. It doesn't really give the city a clear target, but it's not, we're not lowering it.
Okay, and so the benefit to the city now is that we have a clear target that is based on this more thorough model.
And it's based on programming. So so Hill Tower Park is a neighborhood park right now, and parks can be both designations, right? So Milton is both a neighborhood park and a community park because it has comprehensive programming that also attracts people from all over the city. So right now, Hill Tower is a neighborhood park. There's nothing that you're necessarily going to drive all the way across the city to go to Hill Tower Park because they have this special thing. But it's got a playground, it's got basketball. And if you add programming to that, Hill Tower Park could then satisfy the requirement of a community park. So you can satisfy that acres needed without necessarily acquiring new land.
So is there a way to have a denser services park? And I'm thinking of like, I guess I don't know what this would look like exactly, but like something where there was a multi-tier structure, right? Like a 3-story playhouse that kids just love so much, but it's on a tight, half-acre lot.
I think that would be a community park. It's not about the size, it's about the programming.
Okay.
I guess, although, yeah, we're talking about acres, so it is tied to acreage in a way.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at, right? Is that acres is still so critical here. Is there a way for us to? We have a very limited land space, as you know. Is there something we can do with pocket parks or small urban plazas or even cutouts on the trail to meet some of these neighborhood park goals?
Yeah. I mean, you could create smaller pocket parks if you think that would satisfy the need better, and those could still serve as neighborhood parks.
But it would still fall short of this level of service measurement because it's still at its root founded in acreage, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, there are metrics that don't use acreage a lot at all, but what they do is they prescribe a bunch of different characteristics to the park and then give them a score, and then you read a bunch of numbers associated with the park, and it doesn't mean anything. It makes no sense, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think that this level of service reflects what we've heard from constituents, what they want to see in the parks, and I think realistically, I mean, you could have a tiny pocket park with a splash pad, but it's not really going to satisfy the need.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think that's what Councilmember Whalen was getting at as well, that people want space. They want to have the city providing some space. So yeah, no, I hear you. Thank you for your work on this.
No,
I
I
really do like
appreciate it. It's hard to explain it going through a presentation, so I'm glad we spent the extra time.
Any other questions for our presenter this evening? Before I let Councilmember Whalen go a second time, has anyone that's not spoken want to speak? Okay, Councilmember Whalen.
And thank you very much. And looking at the future of the city of Milton, looking at this future of the state of Washington, and the densification of housing in areas that were generally more wide open spaces. We've got a lot of houses that are on half acres. In a very short time, you're probably going to have 4 houses on that half acre. So the densification of certain areas of the city is going to increase far beyond our ability to get parkland. It is more valuable to put people on it than it is to sell it to the city for a park. So what does the future look like in the amount of landscape that's available for nurturing parks as we start to significantly increase the densification of homes, smaller homes? There's not as much land left. So if we don't act soon, we're going to cost us a lot more to act later. Is that kind of in the thought process?
I mean, it's not necessarily within, so a lot of parks plans don't include natural areas and green space corridors within the level of service at all. And that's why we wanted to include it in Milton's, because open space is important to Milton residents. So this is an effort to help protect some of that space. I mean, when cities are doing comprehensive planning, they are setting aside land for parks. So there is enough room to do all of what's in this plan. But beyond that, I think because natural areas and green space corridors are important to Milton residents, that's why we have in this plan that there needs to be a certain number of acres per person, per 1,000 residents.
I came to the city of Milton, there's 2,700 residents. Now there's 8,000. You know, it's changed, but we've also expanded and so forth. But there isn't a whole lot of land available. It's, unfortunately, it's for development. And that's fine. I'm not criticizing people who want to develop and so forth. But I get the impression that if we don't act fast, we're not going to be able to act. It's just the way the city is changing and being more populated and so forth. Our community park is extraordinary. But we've also paved over a lot of what was a park into facilities. We have the pickleball court and so forth, and the tennis courts and so forth. Wonderful. But they're populated with a lot of people from out of the city who come here because there's this space. So if we don't do something soon, it's going to cost us a lot more and be a lot smaller. You know, just kind of expanding the thought process about what you have to do as quickly as you can to save this, to save the parks. Thank you.
Any other questions for council or from council? Okay. Thank you, Hope, for your time this evening.
Much for your feedback.
Thank you. Thank you.
Director Madden, are you using the projector?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So council, the next item on our agenda is 4A on page 35 of your packet. It is a discussion on the outdoor meeting space or outdoor meeting venue. I will turn the floor over to Director Madden.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight, we will be taking a look at the current design for the outdoor meeting structure. I will get into a little bit of history of how this project was conceived, where the funding originally came from, and then Leslie, here with Framework, an architect that works with them, will go over the specifics of the structure. So Council has a comprehensive understanding of what this structure is and what it is not. And we will get into the details, and at the end, we can talk a little bit more about budget and answer any questions council may have.
Great, thank you. It's nice to be here. We've been working on this for a while, and it's interesting to have this discussion in the context of parks and how you use parks well and what kinds of programs you use them for. This structure is designed to do many things. It could be used for small gatherings. It can be used when you've got large gatherings, and the community park is where those large gatherings take place. It's located on one of the flat parts of Milton's parks, and it's right at the edge of where it goes down towards the play structure. There's a raised area around there where people could sit and see that, and a flat area in front. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. The platform is concrete. It's approximately 35 feet by 22 feet. It's a pretty sizable platform. It's raised up with seating steps on 3 sides. It's got handicapped access on the west side so that people in wheelchairs can come up to the platform itself. Above that is a steel structure. The steel structure, if you're looking at it from looking towards the west, has a very it's an M, a little bit of a sneaky M. We didn't want to have it be too obvious, but it is an M that opens up to the east. It's on a steel frame structure.
Leslie, real quick, Council, page 77 is the best place to start of your packet to kind of look at an overview or a section view of what vertically this would look like.
Director Madden, what on the, we provided them with a bigger one without numbers, I don't believe.
Yep, so it would be
So-
page 3
3, okay.
of that document.
That's this one. Is that- Yeah, here we go. Or A 1.1. Yeah, so you can see the shape of the roof. It is a trapezoid opening up towards the gathering area. It goes up and down, so that's what forms the M. It drains to the back. You can see on the lower right, the steps surrounding it, and on the upper right. And so that could be used for seating as well. But this allows you a dry spot. It allows you to have a focal point in that park. It's usable for large and small gatherings. It's a place you can get out of the weather. Some things that could happen there, I was just watching a martial arts class in a similar kind of structure where people were using that for classes for outdoors, for dancing, for, I don't know, yoga. But there are things that could happen under that in this park that is about gathering. The underside is wood, tongue and groove, so it has a kind of natural feel to it, but it's very robust. The steel and the concrete are very strong materials, they're very durable. It's built to last. It's built to be easy to maintain. And we think it's a nice design, and it would be something that would be a signature for the town. You know, other towns that have made similar kinds of structures, it's kind of a signature. Puyallups is well known in the region. If you've been over there, it's very beautiful. Volunteer Park has one that is really a signature for that park now. So anyway, this is what we have put together. We did start off with some different ways that we could approach this. There are things you can buy off the shelf and just plunk down there. We got a lot of feedback that we liked something that actually was specifically designed for Milton and for this site. So that's the road that we pursued.
Leslie, can you talk a little bit about size, why the dimensions are what they are?
Yeah, I think, one of the important functions, not the only function, but an important function is to have it function as a stage for Milton Days. And we wanted it to have enough room so that you could have more than just a duo up there. So you could have a real band that would be playing there. And we looked at the size of the stage that you've used. That was a temporary stage before, and used that as a model. But it would be generous enough so that people weren't, right at the edge of the structure.
Very good. Any questions on the specifics of the design before we go into budget? Yeah.
Is there an internal sound system in it, or will it have power accessible to the people who are using it? Will there be lighting?
It will have power. It's designed to take lighting. You have to bring your own sound system.
But it will be powered.
There will be power to the site. And we designed it in a way where it's what they call forward compatible. Basically, we can't afford to outfit it the way we'd like to right now. And so we designed it in a way where we could run a sound system at a future time. We can put in some enclosures around the back for changing spaces in a play. We could also use drapery. We tried to conceptualize all the potential uses and design it in a way where it's forward compatible, where it basically is adaptable. It can be used for many, many different things.
So you could modify it in the future. You could add different, is what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
but it has the structural integrity to be a facility that has a significant life cycle, and it will be could be a substantial improvement for generations of Milton residents.
I only had one other question. So the roof will be, if you were on the concrete slab looking up, so it'd be car decking?
Yeah, you'd see the wood car decking.
Okay, and then it would be a moisture barrier, it sounded like?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
a composite?
Yes, and the roofs are shingle. Nobody's going to see the top of it unless they're in a plane or something. So we just went with straight shingles.
Okay. But then it would be shingles on top of,
Oh, yeah, it's weatherproofed,
or I
for
guess
sure.
it sounded like then it was plywood, then the shingles would be on top of that?
Mhm. There's some details in your packet, I think,
Yeah.
if you want to take a look.
Councilmember Cedar.
Thanks. I have two quick questions. It looks to me like the roof does not cover the entirety of the concrete slab. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Is that a deliberate, and you mentioned low maintenance, but that to me seems like it may increase maintenance, and the, outside of that slab kind of becomes less usable should we have rain, if we ever had something in the rain, or the steps could, weather faster than the rest of the slab. Was there any consideration for a wider roof to cover the entirety of the concrete?
That would be more. The band fits under there fine. I think the concrete is very durable, and streets are concrete, so getting rain on it isn't really a problem. It does drain. It's got a little bit of slope on it, so the water should not be pooling on the step there.
And we sized it in a way where it met multiple needs for the city of Milton, but still we were attempting to minimize costs and overruns at the same time. It was a fine balancing act.
Yeah, and I see it as more aesthetically pleasing this way too, which I appreciate. But yeah, that was my concern. The other question I had then was about noise. Did you, one concern as we've talked about this kind of over the last couple of years is that Milton Way is loud because cars are loud, and particularly accelerating up a hill. It concerns me to have any kind of meeting there. Was there any measurements taken of noise or any thoughts for additional deadening or additional vegetation that could be placed nearby to deaden noise?
We did think about that. I am an oboe player, and I've played outdoors, and it can be challenging. So especially when a truck is going up the hill, there is some noise there. Vegetation is not the sound barrier that you might think. It doesn't help that much. One of the things that Dustin was alluding to is this frame could take panels quite easily. So you could actually even just hang an acoustic panel if you wanted on various sides. So these, the steel columns are very forgiving and the truss. So it is something, especially if you were going to do a theater kind of performance, that there are ways you could put panels on there that you could hide the actors as they changed, or help with some of the acoustics. You may not need that for the rock and roll band.
Right, and that question 2.5, I suppose, is regarding acoustics. With the slope of the roof, is there any kind of natural amplification that occurs just as a result of the layout, or is that not? I mean, I know it's not an amphitheater style, but is that in there?
Yeah, I think, yes, if you were projecting, the sound would kind of go off, sound goes off hard surfaces. So it bounces as it goes up and then down. So there would be some, but I think it wouldn't be, it's not like you're in an acoustic situation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Strader, and then Hall, and then Whalen.
You said there were steps coming down. Are they coming down from the stage?
Yes, they come down. It might be helpful to look at the plan, which is on,
Sheet A1.1,
yeah.
which should be page 3 of your larger packet.
No, actually, that shows the roof. Yeah, A1.0. Okay, so if you take a look, you can see that the flat part of the podium is roughly 35 by 22, and then it's got 2 steps. And those steps are wide enough that they would be really nice to sit on. That's kind of part of the idea of making it multi-use. So those are above the ground, one up, and then you get to the main part of the platform.
Okay. Well, I'm having a trouble with considering that seating when your focus is supposed to be at the front of the stage.
This would be like on a day like today, or when the sun was out, that you could sit on the stage. It wouldn't be used during a performance.
Are they wide enough to host a chair? Would you be able to stick a chair on them?
No, it would just be overflow seating. And one of the inspirations was Pioneer Park down in Puyallup. So if you've seen that park and you can envision it, they've got the steps that come across the front, and then they've got ADA access ramp up around the back. And so it essentially echoes that design.
Well, to me, I'm looking at a stage, not a outdoor venue meeting place. place? How is that a meeting place?
Well, I
Other
think it
than-
can be both.
Huh?
It's not an or. The intent was to be an additive feature. So it can serve multiple functions for the city. I hope we never find ourselves in another pandemic situation, but if we did for 6 months, we would be able to put acoustic panels on this, have additional ventilation, and have an outdoor meeting venue that the city could utilize.
Well, didn't they shut down outdoor meetings during the middle of the pandemic, the CDC? So how would that work?
They may have, I do not remember that exact situation, but I think we have all learned a lot from that experience, and I don't think it would be handled the same way.
Okay, all right. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall, oh, sorry,
I was just
Leslie.
saying, we're hoping that it is used not just for events, but it can be used at other times for other uses. And maybe there's a table and chairs under there, so you could go out there and, you know, be out of the sun or out of the rain, and it could be a small gatherings when it's not used for larger events.
I thought you said that the roof doesn't extend out past that area, so.
It doesn't, but there's plenty of space if you put a table in there for people to sit and gather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I did think of the last question. Okay, you said the material of the roof was going to be composition?
So
Why not metal?
Because
Cost.
metal's more expensive,
Okay.
and nobody's going to see it, so.
Councilmember Hall?
So we're putting in concrete, we've got the seating area. How are we? gonna get
Councilmember Hall, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
into the drainage part of it, as far as how do we drain the water away from that venue?
Yeah, the water drains on page A10. The roof is coming down to the west, and on the layout plan, on the upper left, you can see sloped drainway. So,
Councilmember Hall, right between the ADA ramp and the flat area of the meeting space, the upper deck, there is a small drain column there.
Okay.
Yeah, with drain rock, and then it would percolate into the soil around that as an outlet.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And bear with me, I've got a little path to move down. The funds for this initiation, for this function, has come from the state of Washington. Am I correct? I suspect the state of Washington has some strict standards that we're going to have to follow to make it fit the gifted money that we have. It's got to be out of the rain, you got to have a roof on, there's a few other things. But will there be a bathroom there?
There will not be a bathroom as part of this phase of the project. We are looking at potentially adding a bathroom up above by the 15 Avenue tank, the water tank. There's also, we put in a semi-permanent portable unit down next to Kemper Park last year, which we kept over the winter. We got a lot of positive feedback. That was a benefit to the community. So to answer your question, right now there would be a restroom above this location and below.
The reason I ask that, because we're ADAing this, and ADA can't get up the hill across the park. They can't get down the hill across the park. Is there anything within the state that would require an ADA bathroom?
Not that I.
Because
not
generally
that
in
I've seen.
the public, when you have an arena like this, we have to provide ADA compliant restrooms. It's just a thought to think about. We're spending state money for a lot of this, and I don't know all of their standards.
So just one minor caveat there. I am not identified any state funding for this project. There was $200,000 of ARPA funds, and we'll get into this more when we talk about budget. And then any kind of overages would need to be supplemented with local capital improvement funds.
Yes, but there is state money stored, there is state money entwined in this. And I just want to be sure that we make sure that we do everything that they say we need to do, everything they want us to do, and everything that's needed for the public. Let me just move on a little bit. I saw the path that may go around the lower park. Will that be permeable?
It's not part of this project, actually.
Well, it's not part of this phase of the project. What we're presenting for council today is what was bid in January of this year, and it is the structure by itself, and the concrete pad, the steps, the steel, the roofing. That is what we're proposing. That's what's before council today. Any kind of paths associated and that will be needed would be part of a future development.
I'm trying to put a few questions in for the future.
Okay.
When we talk about this. We have a permeable parking in that park right now, which I think we're coming up on a cleaning schedule that has to be done soon, both for the park and for the community building that's up on 15. And I was just wondering if we would consider continuing with that process. It seems to be very successful as far as keeping the parking lots clean. I like this idea. Don't get me wrong. I like it very much. We're being seated by the state to do something like this. And I just want to make sure that we don't forget to do something that they want to do, that they would possibly even improve our position with additional funding if we do additional things. The state has a habit of doing that sometimes. Parking along Oak Street, very critical for this. And we have exposed drainage right now. We would probably have to culvert that, more than culvert that. What's the term when you actually bury the pipe in the ground for the drainage?
Hard line is,
What?
a hard line is a term.
Hard line.
Yes.
Yeah, to facilitate the parking, because and that would be a rather significant change on Oak Street. Would we do the whole Oak Street at the same time, or would we just do this part and then the rest of it? Is that,
Valid question. The answer is what we have before us and what we're ready to construct is the stage by itself. It's not improvements along Oak, although those Oak Street improvements have been identified in both the storm CIP and the overall capital CIP. So we're in the background working on, that would be phase 2, would be sidewalk going up Oak and parking improvements, tight lining the storm system to allow those improvements.
and I didn't know if possibly within the state of Washington, to have this as a outdoor venue that the city could use for sans another COVID event and so forth. When do we have to have parking available? When do we have to have access for the public? If that's in this, if they're just giving us this money now and saying, no, do what you want and so forth, that's fine. But I'm just looking for the background details that we may find ourselves in using this money for an outdoor venue. And it was basically, I was told, council could meet there. If council can meet there, the public's got to be able to get there. Is that still in this program? Is that still a function of this stage? Let's put it that way. Is that still a function of all of this?
Yes, in a roundabout way through future phases. But before us today is just the bare bones structure and the associated infrastructure required to build the steel. So the concrete, the footings.
And what's before us today is what we're going to do tomorrow. So if you don't talk about it today, you make mistakes tomorrow.
We've been thinking about it nonstop. We siloed this portion of the project just to limit scope, what they call scope creep, where the project scope can just continually expand and expand. And this project is absolutely subject to that because you can see it's gonna need to tie into Oak Street. It's going to need to tie into a restroom facility, as you pointed out. All of those are needs, but those needs are not associated with a timeline from a state government.
And it's always good to bring it up, just so everybody's on the same page, because there's folks here that may or may not have been here at the time of these considerations. The walking path, very great idea. Because it will give more access to the general public who uses the sidewalk along Melton Way and across the park and so forth. That feature in this, which I don't think we had talked about that before, that's a very nice feature, especially if you give it access, paved access to Oak Street and paved access to the sidewalk on Melton Way. I like what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just make one clarification? ARPA funding is federal funding, and so it's not state funding, it's federal funding. And that federal funding that we received was allocated through the budget process by council. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear, it's federal funding.
They're as hard to work with as the state.
Say it one more time.
The federal government is as hard to work with as the state is.
Yeah.
Sometimes even harder.
Yeah, I believe the CARES money, correct me if I'm wrong, was the state funding money. ARPA was federal.
Yeah. Well, you just bring it up, put it on the table, and then you
Yeah.
can forget about it once it's said.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember, well, actually, before I let Councilmember Cedar go, nope, you're good. Okay, so Councilmember Cedar first. Whitaker's already gone.
I went, but.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. I just had a quick question. So we're going to have this ramp in the back. It's not going to have any path associated with it at time of build, correct?
No.
Okay. So it'll provide a more of a walking path, less intended for like I guess you can wheel across the grass, but less intended for wheelchair, more of just for walking, avoiding steps. Is that the goal?
Correct.
And then obviously, as you said, long-term goal is to tie it in with other features.
Yes, and there will be a short-term goal if council decides to approve this project and move forward with the build, where we are going to be rapidly designing a sidewalk to get from that ADA ramp out to Oak Street.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Whitaker?
Answered just what I was going to ask.
Perfect.
But, because I just wanted to express that with this, I totally understand that at this point, a path doesn't directly come with the building. But I think it's extremely important because you got to give people easy access to the building. So that's
Yes.
not you, thank you for answering that.
Councilmember Hall, did you have a question?
So for the additional items that we're going to need to make this a true venue, do we have monies put aside for those this year? Or is that something that you're going to come back with next year for budget?
There are other areas of the budget, park improvement, park beautification, that we have a sidewalk fund that we have been accumulating funds in lieu of program that we offer people developing sites within the city. So there are other areas that we can pull from to get that immediate need of taking a sidewalk out to Oak Street.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Strader?
Back to the roof. You said that the metal roof is more expensive, but don't they last longer?
Oh, the shingled roof should be just fine. And I think it's a pretty easy thing in, 20 years or something. If you needed to reshingle it, it's still a substantial savings over the metal roof.
Okay. And have we done a projection on what the maintenance costs are going to be?
Wonderful question. Right now, there are not significant maintenance costs associated with it because it's a skeletal structure. But as you can imagine, there is seasonal maintenance on the roof. There's double checking on the drainage. So we've talked about those numbers. We don't have a concrete budget number.
Ballpark it.
30 hours a year
Of work?
of work.
Okay.
Yeah. Cleanup work,
be done by city staff.
Correct.
Okay,
And that would be on the high end.
okay.
Any other questions from council?
Okay. All right, I will just then return if we're done talking about the design itself. Thank you, Leslie. So the agenda item 4A, this will give you some additional background, but to step back a little bit further, in 2024, we budgeted $150,000. That was a carryover budget for the outdoor meeting venue. We have used $60 of that, $150 to date, and this, so the $150,000 that we have allocated is ARPA funding, which is federal funding. Those funds were provided to the city in 2021. During the budgeting process of the calendar year 2021, the project was submitted for consideration for the 22 budget. Council adopted that as an eligible project. Since that time of adoption, we've submitted 3 reports to the U.S. Treasury Department in regard to how we're using the ARPA funds. And we've received no questioning about, is this an eligible project for ARPA funds? They have already processed some of the reimbursement requests. And those projects, ARPA funds, projects identified for ARPA funds were not required at the time of identification to obtain pre-approval. So I just want to give council a little bit of background where the money came from for the original project, that it was vetted with the Department of Treasury through 3 different reports, annual reports that the city has provided, and we've received no negative feedback or questions about eligibility. So in the 2024 budget, we've got $150,000. We worked with Framework to come up with this design that we just reviewed, and in January, we went out to bid to get numbers for construction. We received a total of 5 bids. The apparent low was a company by the name of Casabella LLC, and their low bid, responsive low bid, is $449,868. So you can see there's quite a delta between available ARPA funds and the cost of the project itself. And just to round, $300,000 is the shortfall. Could we come back to the drawing table and put in a prefab structure that Leslie alluded to earlier? Yes, we could. Those prefab structures are made out of aluminum. They might meet the need for today, but they're not going to meet the need for tomorrow. And they're not going to be a substantial investment for the city. That'll be something that we'll continually rebuild. Those prefab structures also do not have the associated concrete work to elevate that structure, which gives it its grandeur. It also gives it the possibility of multiple uses. So that is where we are today. The other bids that we received, the high was $606,000. So you can see there's quite a range, even in the bids themselves, almost $160,000. The driver of that cost is steel and concrete site work. This project will be coming back to council for endorsement and approval next week during March 18th. And I'm happy to answer any other questions related to budget concerns, potential other funding sources, whatever council would like to discuss.
Councilmember Strader?
Okay, you said you put this out to Framework to do an estimate of what this project was going to cost. Is that correct?
Framework did some initial calculations, but the bidding market has been such a variable market that it's hard to predict firmly. We knew we were going to be over the 150. We didn't know quite how much until we got the contractor's bids back. When I said Framework went out to bid, what they did is they placed these plans set that we just reviewed on an online bid center. We opened it up to the public. We put in an advertisement out in the News Tribune, and we opened that project up for 3 weeks. There was a bidding cycle, and then we open sealed bids, and we have identified an apparent low responsive bidder, and that's Casabella.
Okay, I'm perplexed as to why council is just hearing about what these other bids were now. Why weren't we informed about where you were at this before you even went out to bid? I mean,
Well, we
you
didn't
told-
know before we went out to bid, and we just received those bids back at the very end of January, early February. And so this was the first opportunity to bring the project forward to council. A lot of our construction projects, we just bring one time for council review and approval. The thought process here was, so we don't surprise anyone, to bring it forth in a study session, review all aspects of the project, make sure council has a deep understanding of the pros and the cons and the costs, and has the opportunity to ask any questions you may have.
Well, I thought we were told like 150,000 was your first time you came to us and asked about doing a survey on it. And then how come you didn't come back to us once you had had the information? And what was the budget? Was there I mean, you just said, come up with this, we've got a design for a structure. I mean, you must have known how much money you were looking at then, right?
200,000 was the budget that we started with.
Yeah.
50 of that has gone to design iteration, feedback, community outreach. What's that? Permitting. I should also mention, thank you, Leslie, that this project has already gone through a permitting process and has an active building permit associated with it that has been approved.
Okay.
So that's where we are today. Your
yeah,
question is
yeah.
absolutely valid. We didn't know that what the cost was actually going to be until we received those bids back at the end of January.
For one on council, I would say I would have liked to have seen that before anything went out to bid, so that we could have looked at that. Is this something that we want to continue to pursue? Because we were looking at, you said 200,000, and now we're up to $500,000. So how, how
have
do we
those
afford
numbers.
that?
We didn't have those numbers to present to you. We didn't have an engineer's takeoff that gave us the highs and the lows of what the contractors would come back at. This is the first opportunity we've had to sit down with council and explain the process and the bids.
All right. Well, I would have thought that you would come back before council before you had even put out the bids is what I would have preferred before we said, okay, well, we talked about 200,000 and now we're clear up to $500,000. How do we justify that and say, why did we even put out the bids if this is something that we can't afford? It's,
Yeah, and we don't, maybe as a point of process, we don't bring those forward to council before we get the contractor's numbers back, because we never really know if the bids are going to come in high, if they're going to come in low. It's been a difficult bid market for 3 years, so
I get that.
I had an inclination of where they would come in. I was surprised by that number also, but that number was balanced against the other 5 bidders, the other 4 bidders.
Now, whether it's they're balanced against one another, they're still pretty high. I mean,
Agreed. And, for perspective, the Pioneer Park that structure was over $1 million in today's value.
yeah, right,
And-
right. Well, and those costs have gone up significantly from when they put theirs up. So, okay, thank you.
Mayor Potem?
Thank you. So you're basically saying that you had to go through this process to find out even how much it was going to cost.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Yes.
So, because you're more of an expert on this than I am, so where would you foresee the funding process? Is it more now at a point where if council wanted to do this, that, okay, it's going to take us 3 years to acquire the funds to be able to do this project? Of course, we understand that as years go by, costs increase. So is that where you're coming from now?
I think,
Because I kind of see what Councilmember Strader is saying is that, okay, now we know this, now what do we do?
right.
So is that kind of though what you were thinking is maybe this is a project that's 3 years from now, 4 years from now? And then,
Oh, go ahead.
no, and then just trying to determine where we're going to get the funds, how are we going to go about funding the project? There we go.
So I will say that projects are not getting cheaper, unfortunately. And so we are in a decent bid climate right now. Coming out of the recession, some of the supply chains are back open. And so what my intent was here today is just to lay out the options in front of council. It's a council decision. Do we want to move the stage forward? Or do we want to wait? Do we want to downscope? There's several options there. If we wait, we would have to go back out to rebid. We could hold our plans. Our building permit would expire, but we could reapply. But right now, this project, if funds are allocated to fund the delta, the gap between the 150 and the 449, this project's ready to go. And we have a contractor who can get it done in 120 days. Yeah.
Director Madden, can I just also add that the ARPA funding has to be used by I believe, the end of 2025. So we can't push it out too far. We're going to lose the money. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is funding available that we would pull from other projects, which is within the authority of the administration to do. So it might just delay some projects if we would be able to get to those this year anyways.
Correct. And those other projects, there's several that we could potentially pull from. And those are all within the 310 fund, so the capital improvement fund. So they're not transferring between funds. It's an inter-fund transfer.
What, in closing, and then if I may?
Mhm.
So what would be those other funds that it would affect?
Excellent question. So those funds are citywide park improvements, and we have a beautification project also that we could potentially pull some funds from, and then sidewalks. We may be able to use some of the sidewalk funds as long as they're adjacent to the street. So there's several different funding sources we could pull from.
So we have the.
I shouldn't have mentioned sidewalks. That would be outside the scope of this project.
But, so then we do have the funds, it would just be shuffling the funds around, am I correct?
You are correct. We would be postponing other projects within the 310 fund to allocate those funds to this so we can construct this now. That is one option.
Okay. I'll let somebody else.
Let's have Councilmember Whalen go first. He hasn't spoken twice yet.
I'm sorry, was there somebody else?
No, it's you, Councilmember Whalen.
Well, I'm trying to remember exactly how the whole course of this went. But the monies that we're spending to do today, bidding and so forth, is not city money per se. It's gifted money from the federal government.
Correct.
So it's not, we're not spending the taxpayers' dollars. We're spending what the federal government gave us to do.
Coming from ARPA funds.
Yep, so the 150 would come from ARPA. We would exhaust that, and then potentially, if council wants to, and votes it, we would allocate other local funds from the 310 category to fund the delta.
Okay, it's becoming clearer. The more we talk about it, it becomes more clear. So thank you.
Councilmember Strader, you've talked 3 times, so I need to let other people go first. So Councilmember Hall, did I see your hand? No. I did, or yes? Councilmember Hall? No?
No.
No, I'm sorry. Councilmember Cedar, I think I saw your hand.
This will be my third time too.
Oh, I'm not keeping good. I'm not keeping good tally marks. Look at me. I'm going to put a 4 by your name now.
No, this will be my
Thanks.
third.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
you're good.
Okay,
He's already
thank you.
talked 3 times. You're good.
Councilmember White, did you have want to make a
No.
question?
Did you? You do now? What?
He raised
I
his
made eye
hand.
contact. I'm sorry. Let's go with Councilmember White first, and then we'll go back to Cedar.
I understand there are favorites. Are there any grant opportunities that we can apply for this project?
Not if we want to meet our current timeline. I'm not aware of any grants that would have that type of turnaround from authorization to allocating the funds.
What kind of timeline?
Typically, it's about a 2-year timeline that
Really?
you need to apply. Yep, and that's one of the reasons that we pushed on the PROS plan, because we know that Hilltower Park is going to require additional grant funds. So we needed to get this mechanism complete, so we are in a position to even apply for RCO funds.
Can grants be applied for, and in the meantime, using other funds from other projects? And then by the time the grant is approved or not, I guess the question I'm asking, do you have to, if you're applying for a grant, do you have to wait to start the project until an answer is received on the grant application? Or can you apply for the grant, use other funds, or borrow from other projects to do this project? And then would the granting agency allow the grant funds to replenish the funds for the ones we borrowed from?
So unfortunately, I believe the answer is no. I'm not aware of any grants, and Leslie, hope, correct me if you're aware of any grants where you can apply for them after the fact, after the project is complete, and receive grant funds to offset those costs. Just to kind of simplify it, if we would like to supplement the project overrun with grant funds, we would need to postpone the project for multiple years.
If that were something that was decided that we do, what is the probability that we could receive grant funds for this project?
I mean, there's always an opportunity and a chance. Those grant fund cycles are very competitive, and we're competing against the Seattles of the world with 20 grant writers and presenters. And so there's always an opportunity to earn a grant, and we can put that project forward. And this PROS plan gives us a lot more ammunition to apply for those grants. But there's no guarantee.
Okay. Is there something that $150,000 could be used for on other projects that are waiting to be done? I'm just
Not the
I
way
guess
it's
the question I'm
currently
asking,
worded.
would we lose the $150,000 if we don't go forward with this project, or could those funds be used for something else?
I do not know the answer to that question.
I don't believe any of our projects in the 310 would qualify. Again, I'm going back to 2021, 2022, but based on the discussions that we had, I don't think anything within 310. Now, we could probably put those funds into the well, which is where the other 2 million funds are allocated. But Director Simpson would have to verify that.
Yes, if worst case scenario, these are ARPA funds, and we've been submitting for the last couple of years what we were going to use these ARPA funds for. And one of the biggest things we were going to use the ARPA funds for was the deep well project. So if we did not use this 150 for this outdoor meeting venue, we could apply it to the deep well, because we have been submitting that like we've been submitting this, and we've not gotten any pushback.
Okay, I just bring it up because I just want to know what the options are.
Mhm.
Because the feeling that I'm getting is that we have to push forward with this. Otherwise, we're going to lose these grant funds, this $150,000. And if that's not true, then I think that should be made plain.
Yeah, you're not going to lose them necessarily. We won't have the 150 to apply towards the outdoor meeting space in the future. We'll just reallocate them to the well. I'm going to assume that we'll probably allocate them to the well per council's approval of that.
Okay, we're not allocated to the well. how is the well going to be completed without these funds?
We have so council approved 2 million to go to the well. 200,000 for the outdoor meeting stage, and then the remainder, I can't remember exactly, $2,000 or so maybe was, I'd have to go back and look, was used for, like if we wanted to buy hand sanitizer or, you know, we had to shut down and we had to compensate staff time, things like that. So just miscellaneous expenses. If council doesn't want to move forward with outdoor meeting space, then we would just use that, we would have council in a budget amendment move that 150 out of 310 into the well, because the well is probably going to cost more than 2 million, I believe anyways, potentially.
Potentially.
So and then if we didn't use it on the well, then we would lose it probably, because we won't have anything else that qualifies.
Well, money is a pretty fungible thing. If it was allocated to the well, then money that is in that fund could be reallocated
Not to
someplace else.
310, no, not to 310. It has to stay within the water. You can't move water back into general fund. So stuff that's allocated to general fund, we could move. But yeah, we couldn't just then go, oh, we have an extra 150 in 2025, let's move that back over to 310. You can't do that.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Cedar was next.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm sorry, that was very interesting. Thank you for getting into that, Councilmember White. Director Madden, you mentioned 120 days for the timeline for completion. What is that 120 days start point? Like, when are we talking about this happening?
At the notice to proceed. So this item will come back for a vote to council on the 18th. If it's voted yes, we would notify the contractor immediately, and we'd likely set a notice to proceed date of April 1st or April 2nd.
And then within Fund 310, you mentioned sidewalks there, but I was just unclear. Were you talking about sidewalks for this project, or were you talking about drawing funds from other 310 projects that deal with sidewalks?
I was talking about drawing funds from other 310 projects related to sidewalks. And, you know, I'm looking at that creatively within 310, just trying to give council options on where potentially this overrun could come from.
Yeah, and I appreciate that creativity, because I, for one, am sick of allocating almost $1 million for missing links for sidewalks that, you know, for 3 years we've allocated it for, and we just don't see them. And I know you share that frustration. I know that others do as well. So I'm not inclined to fund this project, which I think is cool. I think this is a really nice thing. I think it would be a nice signature piece for Milton's signature park. But I'm hesitant to pull from things that we just absolutely need, which is complete sidewalks.
Right, and sidewalks would not be a project that we'd be able to pull from. And that's why I corrected myself at that time. It would be citywide transportation beautification or park improvements.
So, okay, yeah, I see transportation beautification.
We could even do what's left over from our City Hall retrofit, correct? Because that's
Correct.
310.
That's a 310
We could
fund.
we could forgo wayfinding for another year, potentially.
What was that?
Wayfinding. We are working on that project right now, but it could be pushed out to next year.
Right, we could allocate, you know, 30,000 from wayfinding. We could do one wayfinding monument this year instead of 2 or 3. Those are the type of reductions that I'm thinking. Yes.
Yeah, and that, you know, I was speaking for myself, that is what I would support. I have no problem delaying wayfinding so that we can avoid compromising our sidewalk plan, but I'll still utilize this 150,000. And I just want to, just addressing the ARPA thing, one, I think having a city meeting space is a great idea, but two, reading through ARPA's rules and the 2022 kind of clarifications of what those means, I see this qualifying for ARPA in several different ways. So I have no concerns that the Department of Commerce will approve this. This, you know, enhances small business ability to raise money there, because I assume that we could rent this out in the same way we do the MAC, right?
Correct.
I think this also serves our parks, which I don't know if we can identify this as an underserved area just because of our lack of parks, but I really don't see a problem. You know, this isn't so far out afield of what DOC has said is appropriate ARPA usage. So that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is losing money elsewhere.
Understood.
Thank you.
I would like to share one thing. Just looking at 2023, for citywide parks improvements, the budget was about 300,000. The actual expenditures were 20,000. So it seems that that isn't being fully utilized. So perhaps that could be used without really negatively impacting. And then a second little detail regarding the ARPA funds is they need to be obligated by December 31st, 2024. So if we commit them in 24, we could continue using them in 25. It's just a detail.
Thanks for that clarification. Has anyone that hasn't gone a third time, well, hold on. Before anyone that hasn't gone a third time, Councilmember White.
Okay, I'm feeling more love, thank you. Just a request for when this comes back next week. Can we please get, I mean, once it's decided, can we get a list of where the money's going to come from, what projects they're going to affect, and what the delays are going to be, so that we have a full picture of what approving this project means
Okay.
as it relates to other future projects?
Easy enough.
Thank you.
Councilmember Strader.
Well, I'll have to agree to disagree with Councilmember Cedar on, after I read through the description what ARPA qualifies as for, what bothers me is the outdoor meeting venue title. It's a stage. It's clearly a stage. And I think it's only worded this way to try to slide it under. To me, it just seems disingenuous. I don't think that it will qualify. Again, I may be wrong, but should it, and this, did you say you got approval from somebody?
It's qualified, and we've already submitted for reimbursement, and they've reimbursed.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, very good.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Which led me into the creative financing. So we could do this fund and then apply for grants to fill in the gap probably next year or the year after for the ones that we didn't do this year.
Correct.
That were pulled from, yes?
Yes.
So that, I mean, that's an option too. That one all of a sudden hit me that, well, you could play it that way if you wanted to.
Mhm.
But granted, with grants, you aren't guaranteed that you're going to get those funds, but that is an option,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
So that would cover then any of these that they'd be pulling from? There are grants for things like?
There are mini grants for park improvements, and, whether it's, I don't know about irrigation, but field renovation, overall facility improvements. We received a grant for the conversion and update of the tennis court. So that was a prime example of a place where we applied for grants, we received them, and we utilized them to offset the city's cost.
But granted, they'd be a few years from now.
Correct.
too.
Any, Councilmember Whalen?
No.
No, you're just thumbs up. Okay.
I like everything I'm hearing.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So we will do a little more work on this before it comes back. Oh, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Would it be reasonable to ask that coming back with those options too? Do you follow what or is that way too big of a
It's
of a
big, but
request?
I can give some thought to what projects we would delay, and are those delayed projects eligible for grant funding?
Okay, that works.
Okay, so let's see. Seeing that all agenda items have been concluded, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned at 8:35 PM.